Because this is the first time I'm doing this without Code Red or my son. So it's like, because we tested last night.
Yeah.
And we thought all the kinks and stuff and realized that it was going to be easy, but still is my first time. So
No problem. We'll get through it together.
Usually, yes, I'm a little support system. Okay.
Yeah.
So I know we can edit it so I could have this conversation. Okay. Good morning.
Good morning.
We'd like to welcome Mr. Liam Teague, or should I say Professor Liam Teague, to the People's Chat Room. And this is a really interesting conversation that we're going to have, and we encourage you to just be a part of it. Okay. So Liam, first question. Let me start by saying that you are a phenomenal player. I listened to Cello Vibes from 13 years ago, I believe, and your touch on the tenor pan is incredible. So how many pan instruments, and I got to say my disclaimer is, I'm not really, I mean, I don't really know the pan that well. I know I enjoy listening to it, but as far as the intricacies and all of that, that's your forte. So how many pan instruments do you play, and which pan is your instrument of choice and why?
I play the majority of the voices, the steel pan voices. The one that I play the most would be the tenor pan, as it's called in the Caribbean. It's, as you may know, it's actually in the soprano range, but in the Caribbean, we refer to it as the tenor pan. To be perfectly honest with you, the reason why I play it the most is because it's the easiest one to travel with. It's just one drum, as opposed to, let's say, the double seconds. Which can sometimes be a bit of a nightmare, especially with the airlines, you know, what they charge nowadays for baggage, etc. But I do play a lot of tenor pan, double seconds, and as you mentioned a few minutes ago, the cello pan, because that piece that you referred to, which is actually called Cello Vibes, but it is for the cello pan.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just pause for a second. That was, I mean, the way how you were just, okay, remember my listening ear. Yes, I am a musician, but still my listening ear is different to what a panist would listen to. But when I saw you playing the three tenors, it's like you were moving with the same vibration, the same energy that you would see any instrumentalist play their instrument. That was, the visual for me was just breathtaking. And then when you combine that with the sound, it was like, wow, it's like you were listening to the pan with a different ear, me that is. So I'm sorry, I had to just jump in there for a little bit. Go ahead.
No problem. Yeah, so cello vibes is for the cello pan, and it's an instrument that isn't always isn't written for as a solo instrument frequently. So so that piece I really love, and I actually just created a new piece for cello pan, which is called Lore Nupi, and it's written for my wife. Her name is Lorena Nunez Pineda, and she's originally from Panama. Okay. So that's sort of her nickname, Lore Nupi. And so I always wanted to write another piece for the cello pan. So this is my humble undertaking.
So have you recorded it yet? Is it something that we can have during this show?
It's a great question. I have recorded it, and I'm coming out with a new recording, hopefully in the spring. So it will be available. And actually, I think I posted it to YouTube a few months ago. So you should be able to find it there.
Okay. I need to let y'all know, my listeners, that is, this man is a challenge to get on this show. I mean, a major challenge, because his schedule is so tight. So this show, of course, is pre-recorded, just in case you haven't figured that one out. But again, it's such a pleasure and an honor to have you on the show, not just because you're a South boy, you know, it's because when one takes the time to read up on your accomplishments, you're phenomenal. Okay.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be on the program as well. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. I hope this won't be the only time. I hope you can get you back another time when we could do it live. When you hear the words the most versatile and accomplished pan musician in the world today, what thoughts and emotions do they evoke?
Well, if I can be 100% honest with you, those are things that other people may have said about me. I don't necessarily take it to heart. For me, I'm a perpetual student. I'm constantly growing. I always appreciate, accolades. It's better than the opposite side of the spectrum, but I don't really put a lot of stock into a lot of these, terms. But what I do try to do is to be as versatile as possible. I've said in past interviews that people can think about me almost like a nosy musical neighbor. I'm up in your business whether you like it or not, right? In some ways, and I've been thinking about this over the past few years, as I've gotten older, the lessons that I've learned growing up in Trinidad and Tobago, and more specifically within the context of the panyard. There were many things that I took for granted until I became an adult and I realized, wait a minute, I was not only taught musical lessons, but life lessons as well. And so one of the things that I truly treasure about the panyard is just how welcoming we are to people of all walks of life, but also in terms of the repertoire that we play. It's very eclectic. So, you could walk into, and it's probably the same now, any panyard, and in their repertoire list, you would have calypso music, you would have soca, you'd have reggae, but you'd also have that next to classical music and jazz standards, and those were life lessons in and of itself, and it stayed with me. It's part of my DNA. So at any given point, you will see me performing with a steel band or with a symphony orchestra or with a jazz combo. And for me, it's just about bringing people together and promoting the versatility and the beauty of this instrument that we love so much.
Okay, so let me switch gears just a little bit. Let's get a little history of you coming into the steel pan orchestra, using that term, and the different bands you would have played with. So I know skiffle is a major part of that because you're from South originally, right?
Correct.
Specifically where? San Fernando proper?
San Fernando.
San Fernando. So just give us a little history of the different pan sides. I went into that, dialect pan sides that you would have.
No, that's fine.
And, your time with them.
Sure. So my first flirtation, so to speak, with the steel pan was actually at a Cub Scout meeting. My father, the late Russell T., he had a Cub Scout troop called First Coffee Boys. And one of the members, his name is Darren Shepard, who is now the arranger and manager of the Fontclair Steel Orchestra. So he was a member of that Cub Scout troop, and he played, I believe it was a pair of double tenors for us. And I just fell in love with the sound. And right then I begged my father to, get me steel pan lessons. And so he took me to the T&Tech Motown steel band. And so that was the first steel band that I played in for a number of years. I eventually transitioned to the Hillside Symphony. And at the time, when I was, I think, 15 years old, I held the record for the youngest arranger for Panorama, which I believe was broken by Atiba Williams, young prodigy. And then in the early 1990s, it's when I moved to the USA to study music at Northern Illinois University. During that period, from then till now, I've arranged for a number of steel bands, including the Skiffle Bunch, as they were called back then, now Skiffle, Starlift Steel Orchestra, and for a number of years for the Silver Star Steel Orchestra, and also Harvard Harps. So those are the main bands that I've worked with as an arranger and a performer.
Okay, interesting. I mean, I vaguely remember your dad. And but I didn't know that I was about to say I didn't know you started that young, but that would have been a stupid statement to make because I mean, with a father like that, of course. What are your memories of your dad, by the way?
Well, as I mentioned to you earlier, there are many things about my life, my early life in Trinidad that I took for granted. And one of them being just how much my mentors played a role in my life. My father probably being strongest of those. So he, anybody that you speak to would tell you that he was always with me, no matter where I performed, and just so encouraging. And it's really because of him that I fell in love initially with classical music. So my father, again, Russell Teague, he was not a musician, but he loved classical music. And so he would have introduced me to different recordings of, classical music virtuosos, like virtuoso pianists, virtuoso violinists. And so early on, probably around the age of 12 or 13, in my head, I saw myself one day being a soloist with a symphony orchestra, but through the medium of the steel pan. The steel pan would be the main instrument, solo instrument. So it's all of these things that he introduced to me. And at the time, I didn't understand the profundity of what he was doing. Now that I'm older, I truly, truly appreciate it. And the fact that, he spent so much time with me, which I try to do with my children. And that's one of the reasons why it's been so hard for me to come onto your program, because usually on the weekends, it's really, really family time.
About them. I understand. That's a good segue into my next, some of what you said, there's a good segue into my next question which is, at what point or stage of your professional career did you decide that your fate as a professional steel panist was going to be different from that of others?
I don't think there was any one point. If I'm being totally honest with you, I never thought, at least initially, about music being a profession. Perhaps I was a bit naive in that respect. Music was just something that I absolutely love. And over time, people started paying me to perform, or to create music. And then I realized, oh, wait a minute, I think I have something here, But I've always been a very, very curious person. And as I said, with this instrument, we from the Caribbean, we understand the beauty and the versatility of it. But I think the world at large, they're still coming to terms with that. And so for me, I'm just one of the ambassadors of this instrument that's trying to highlight the different musical possibilities. And I do feel that in life, it's very, very important to tell your story, be true to yourself. And for me, again, it's exploring all these musical territories and getting into these circuits. For example, I have a duo with one of my colleagues here at Northern Illinois University. Her name is Professor Faye Seaman. She's professor of harp. So we have a duo called Pangelic, and many people would not think that the steel pan and the harp would blend well together, but we've formed this group a few years ago, and people absolutely love what we do. And the thing about it is, I'm taking the instrument into audiences that perhaps would not be that curious about the steel pan. And so now we're turning them on to this instrument, and vice versa, she's performing her harp for steel pan lovers, and like, oh, wow, this is magic that we have here, So for me, it's all about breaking down barriers.
Breaking down barriers, yes. Now, when you say breaking down barriers, I'm thinking, okay, but why is it so difficult in our home country of Trinidad and Tobago to break down the barrier of how important the steel pan is to the culture at large? And when I say, whenever I think steel pan, I also think calypso.
Yeah.
All right. So why is that particular barrier something that is still there? Because again, in doing a lot of research last night to put this thing together, steel pan studies at your university, Northern Illinois University. And I have a couple questions regarding that. I did some research. I looked at University of the West Indies, St. Augustine, or like we say here in the United States, St. Augustine. There's no steel pan studies. There are programs relating to, of course, music, and you may have some segments that would refer to the steel pan, but nothing that actually says steel pan studies.
Well, so what we do at Northern Illinois University, students come here to actually get degrees in music, bachelor's and master's degrees in music, but with a specific emphasis on the steel pan. And so that also exists at the University of the West Indies and at the University of Trinidad and Tobago at the bachelor's level. And as a matter of fact, we've had quite a number of their graduates come to NIU to pursue master's degrees. So it's happening.
Hold up. So you're saying, but it's happening on the bachelor's level. It's not happening on the master's or PhD level.
Not quite yet. And I don't think there's any university in the world that offers steel pan studies degrees on the PhD level. Not yet.
Okay, but I know you're being really nice and all of that, and I appreciate that. My job is to straddle the fence, and in straddling the fence, I'm gonna back it up a bit. I took this out of Steel Pan in Education, which I'm going to purchase today.
Okay.
Because it looks like it's going to be a really good read. This fascinating history of the NIU Steel Band traces the evolution of the program and engages with broader issues relating to the development of steel band and the world music ensembles in the American university system. In addition to investigating its past, Steel Pan in Education looks to the future of the NIU Steel Band, exploring how it attracts and trains new generations of elite musicians who continue to push the boundaries of the steel band. Again, this is happening in a university here in the United States. It's not happening in Mona. It's not happening in St. Augustine. It's not happening in Cave Hill. It's happening here, Northern Illinois University.
Well,
why is that?
Again, and this is one of the things that, first of all, I'm very cautious when I make comments about what's happening in Trinidad and Tobago in that I lived there since I was 19. However, because I've had so many students from Trinidad and Tobago, I do have my finger on the pulse of much of what's going on. And, there's so many positive things happening in Trinidad and Tobago, yes, on the university level and beyond that, but it does not necessarily receive the press that it deserves. And so I don't think it's totally correct to say that these types of things are not happening in Trinidad and Tobago, because again, you look at the University of the West Indies, University of Trinidad and Tobago, and they're doing amazing things. Right now, 3 or 4 of my master's students are graduates of those programs, and they're wonderful musicians. So we need to give credit where credit is due. And unfortunately, and I've been interviewed many times about this, and unfortunately, a lot of folks may not necessarily be aware of what's happening, and again, even within the context of the Panyard, you take somebody like Dr. Mia Gormandy Benjamin, who is now the musical director of the Trinidad All-Stars Steel Orchestra, and what she's doing with their youth program, what she's doing at the University of Trinidad and Tobago. Sion Gomez, a graduate of NIU. Many people are doing great things, but they don't necessarily get the press that they deserve.
And that's the point here. The point is there are many people doing phenomenal things. Mia Gormandy, we had her on the show some years ago, before she finished her studies here in the United States and went back to Trinidad. And she is one, you're another one, the same young man, Sion, even Atiba. We're looking at, there's so many, and it's like, even in the area of Calypso, where one of the things that we've tried to do on this show is we've had Lord Nelson, we've had Lord Relita, we've had Mr. Ron Berridge before he passed. And the whole idea is to try and help people connect the dots to what we have as a culture.
Yes.
In that, I am also nosy because I want to be all up in people's business, but with regards to the culture, because I feel it's so important. When I think about the culture, I have this vibe that is going inside of me that I can't really explain.
Yeah.
And it sometimes it hurts me to see that on the government level or on certain levels where these people can be appreciated daily for what they do.
Yeah.
I get upset. So sometimes I come across a little bit.
It's very, very understandable because I feel the same way, and truth be told, we take our own for granted very much. And I don't know if there's any one way to solve this challenge, but I do think that one way to go is with education. For example, both of my children,
How old are they, by the way?
So my son Jaden, he's 14, and my daughter Jada, she's 9, going on 30. You know how that goes. But neither of them were born in Trinidad and Tobago. But my wife, Lorena, who's from Panama, as I mentioned, we're constantly educating them about their roots, Panamanian roots, Trinidad and Tobago roots. And so they know about Lord Kitchener, they know about Mashel, they know about Bunji, they know about Chutney, right? And I believe in early immersion. We've started them from very, very young. My son plays this, both my kids play the steel pan. My son is also a pianist and a drummer. And so it's constantly educating them about where they come from, and to treasure this. I remember years ago, the great Anthony Williams, who passed recently, went from, in my mind and many people's minds, the greatest genius in the steel band world with respect to the totality of what he brought to this art form. He came into the Panyard and most of the musicians in there had no idea who he was. So that's akin to, I suppose, Michael Jordan walking into, where they're playing basketball and people not knowing who he is. And so again, this comes with education. And it can happen within the context of the Panyard. We can have pictures, we can have various stories, we can have the folks who are in leadership position educating their players so that they celebrate what's come before, but they also celebrate what they are doing and understand the profundity of what they're doing, But it's not an easy sell, and but I'm an optimist, and I believe for the most part in using honey as opposed to vinegar, because most of us know what the challenges are, but are we doing anything about it? You certainly are, especially with this program that you have here. You're educating people. So you mentioned Lord Relator, Lord Nelson. I've seen it with my own students that have come from the Caribbean, very, very gifted musicians, but most of them right now in their 20s, and I've been playing music for them, calypso, soca, from maybe the 80s, the 70s, and many of them have never heard these pieces, and so that says something to me. Now, do I just complain about it? No, my goal is to educate them, and now they know, and then they pass it on to future generations, and I think that can go a long way.
How are you able to balance being a teacher or an educator, a performer, a father, a husband? How are you able to balance all those roles and not be pulling your hair out at the end of the day?
Oh, I do that all the time. It's just that as far as we know, we have one life to live, and there's so much that I want to accomplish, and much of what I do now goes beyond me. I have accomplished quite a lot in my 40th years of life, but I'm constantly thinking about people that I'll never meet. And so whether it's creating music or commissioning composers to write music for the up and coming generation, or making time to be in Trinidad and Tobago, whether it's as an arranger or an educator, I'm all about giving back. And so those are things that inspire me constantly. And I'm very, very hungry musically because there's just so much that I have not accomplished that I would like to accomplish. So, my day usually starts at 4:30,
What?
Yeah, because it's all about balance. And, a lot of times we see the end result, but we don't see the process.
True.
And so what I try, especially with my students, I try to show them the process of not just what I go through, but what others have gone through to achieve certain things. And that can be very, very inspirational,
4:30. I'm still at 4:30. Okay.
Yeah.
You know, before I have a question here, I want to know a little bit more about what you do at Northern Illinois University. But before I get to that, let's talk about Hands Like Lightning. So I've heard you play it as a soloist, and then I've heard you within the context of the band at the university. I prefer the one with the university because what I was looking at, for me, again, is a visual.
Yeah.
I liked how you approached it at the beginning, and then to see the looks on the faces of the students around you when you would just, you just went off and you were doing your thing. And then, of course, when they all came in and they added that energy to it, it was like, so this piece is from about roughly 13 years ago?
This specific version of it, you mean? Or Hands Like Lightning?
Hands Like Lightning on the whole.
Whoa, this is from the early 1990s.
Okay. The version, of course, like I said, with the band, outrageous. Was this a piece that was also done with one of the bands in Trinidad and Tobago?
I don't think so. I don't think so. If it was done, I didn't arrange it for a steel band.
Okay, so do you think that in the future, the near future, we're talking about years from today, that is something that you can repackage and probably encourage one of the bands in Trinidad and Tobago to perform it?
I suppose, if I can be honest with you, I tend not to live in the past. And so Hands Like Lightning, for good or bad, is the piece that most people associate me with, right? And part of that is because of the video I did when I was probably in my early 20s, that was circulating on the airwaves all the time in Trinidad and Tobago. But it's a piece that, in a sense, I've grown tired of, but people like it, so I play it. And the other thing about it is, again, the piece was never actually about me. It was about how I envision people looking during Panorama and the Steel Band Music Festival when you see their hands and how beautiful it is and how fast they were playing. So that's actually what I had in mind. But people think that it's sort of autobiographical, it's about me, but not really.
I didn't think that really, but
a lot of people do, because the main thing they ask me is, well, how do I play so fast? Which is cool, but many times that's where the questions stop. And what I've tried to do is to show, again, the versatility of what I bring to the table, my musicality, my ability to improvise, etc.
I love your honesty, though, when you said you're kind of tired of it. I understand that. I get that totally as a performer. You do, sometimes something that someone may hold on to, and you could understand why they hold on to it because it's special to them. But it's like, okay, enough of that. It's time to move forward. So I get it.
Yeah. But what I've come to terms with over the past few years is that, again, life for me is about balance. And so in my quest to show people what I'm about now, I'll also give them little doses of what they want, because you also have to think about the business of music. And if someone, hires me to perform, they're probably expecting me to do that piece. It's sort of a signature piece. So yes, I'll give them that, but I'll also show them, listen to this classical piece or this jazz standard or calypso that you've heard, but it's reharmonized, so giving them different perspectives.
So let's talk about Northern Illinois University School of Music. Tell us about what you do there, the part that you have played in the program, in that program being the best in the world of the study of steel pan, because it is. I mean, when you look back at some of the students that have come out today, Nia Gormandy, and she's just one of the many names. Tell us about the program.
Well, I should tell you that I don't necessarily subscribe to absolutes where art is concerned. So I would never refer to this program as the best. We're very, very proud of what we do here, but I have so much respect for the many other programs that exist. But so I was a student here. I did my bachelor's and master's degrees, and then they invited me on faculty, a tenured professor. Most recently, I was honored with the Board of Trustees Professorship, which is probably the highest award that this university can present to any professor. And, you know, I say this humbly, but in a sense, I'm living my dream life, doing what I absolutely love in life 24/7. You know, I'm speaking to you right now from my office at NIU. And on a daily basis, I'm doing applied lessons, so one-on-one lessons with our steel pan majors or secondary students. Then I'll transition to steel band rehearsal. We have the NIU steel band meets Monday through Thursday from 1 to 1:50, so just about 50 minutes. You know, and then we're playing wide variety of music. Of course, as a professor, I must attend my share of faculty meetings. Not always the most exciting thing in the world, you know, but it's great to see that perspective and be able to implement changes, you know. And I'm also serving on lots of committees, right? University-wide committees, you name it, I do it. So it's a very, very busy life that I lead. Plus, I'm still trying to maintain, you know, my skills as a performer and a creator of music, and recruiting also is very, very important, you know, because as I said, I'm living my dream life through the medium of the steel pan. Because of the steel pan, that's how I met my wife in Panama. You know, she was a violist playing with the Panama National Symphony. That orchestra had invited me to perform with them, you know, and we met there and we hit it off, we made it work. You know, so this instrument has done so much for me, and I just want to continue to give back, you know, to current and you know, younger generations of steel pan musicians.
Wow, not many people can say that they're living and working their dream job. Not everyone. So you are totally blessed with regards to that.
Very, very fortunate. Very fortunate.
What's the percentage of students that attend the university from Trinidad and other islands in the Caribbean?
So I would say, especially, I would say the majority of our steel pan majors hail from the Caribbean. Right now we have, I think, 8 or 9 steel pan majors. And so I think 5 of them are from the Caribbean. We have 1 student right now from Taiwan.
Okay.
You know? And so they come from all over. But we've been able to offer them either full scholarships or tuition waivers. Recently, we lost our benefactor, our main benefactor, Mr. Les Triller, who produced oil drums in Chicago, not specifically for steel pans, but for shipping, you know, different things. And he heard about what we were doing here from Cliff Alexis, the late Cliff Alexis, who was the co-director of the NIU Steel Band. And Cliff invited him to one of our concerts, because Cliff, in addition to being the co-director and arranging a lot of music and composing a lot of music for a program, also built and tuned all of our instruments. And so Les Triller had no idea what Cliff was doing with these drums. And so Cliff invited him to one of our concerts. And Les Triller just fell in love with what we were doing. And he said to Cliff Alexis and Al O'Connor, who started this program, he said to them, "What can I do to help?" And the first thing they said was that young man, meaning me, needed to get through school. Because at the time, I only had enough money, I think, for 1 semester or maybe 1 year of my bachelor's degree. And essentially, Les Triller started a scholarship, which has supported many, many students from the Caribbean. You know, the aforementioned Dr. Mia Gomendi Benjamin, Sion Gomez, many students, you know, and they in turn have gone on to share their knowledge. So it's a beautiful thing.
Wow. It is a beautiful thing. And when you think of how the part that other people played in on your journey and the journey of others, you know, this world, my mother always would say, no man is an island. Everybody needs somebody. You know, there is no individual here. Everybody, we are a collective. And some people struggle to understand that concept, and some people get it, and you get it. I got a couple more questions. To date, the steel pan, which is the only musical instrument to be invented in the 20th century, like most of us know, there is no Hall of Fame in Trinidad and Tobago for the steel pan. I saw that there was an international Hall of Fame that a gentleman did. I didn't quite get his name. And I've seen that there are other people trying to do their own little individual things to bring about some kind of notoriety and for the steel pan, but there is none. I know we went over some of this early on, but what are your thoughts on that?
Well, one thing I want to mention, first of all, we often say that the steel pan is the only instrument invented in the 20th century.
Isn't it?
In fact, it's the only family of acoustic instruments, non-acoustic, non-electronic instruments to be invented in the 20th century. You have instruments, and definitely the most original. There's no doubting that, no denying that. You have instruments like the vibraphone that actually came into existence in the 1930s, which is the embryonic stages of the steel pan. And you have other instruments, but certainly the most unique family of acoustic instruments. Yeah, the Hall of Fame would be amazing, and again, it would be testament to us celebrating our own, celebrating our local genius, no doubt about it. So whomsoever the powers that be, they need to.
The powers that be, and they have to also do one for the Calypso, because there is no Calypso Hall of Fame. But hopefully within our lifetime, something like that will happen.
Yeah, and I'm hoping, if I could just elaborate on that, I think we're very good at presenting plaques, to our artists or to our local geniuses, etc. But I hope that we can go way beyond that, because as you mentioned, some of the stalwarts, and the last thing that they need is a plaque. Many of them do need financial help.
They do need finance. I remember we had a gentleman from TEAGUE. He's been on a couple of times. And one of the things I mentioned to him, we've got a lot of the older Calypsonians. I mean, it's a long list. We've lost a couple of them over the years. But one of the things that I think that the Calypso leaders should do, and by extension also for steel pan, but more for Calypso, because a lot of these guys are old.
Yeah.
Help them to gently come into the 21st century.
Mm-hmm.
And I say that with, for instance, even something like Zoom.
Mm-hmm.
They don't even know how to do that.
Yeah.
And I'm sure some of these guys paid dues on an annual basis. And I offered to help from abroad here, do something to help them. They've never taken me up on it, because it's something as simple as, the first thing he wanted to know is, would there be a charge? No, there is no charge. I'm doing this from the goodness of my heart. But anyhow, I digress. Standardize the pan. That is a statement that you've heard for many years.
Yeah.
Standardizing the pan. Tell me more about how important that could be if they did it, and why should they do it, and why should they not do it?
I think it's something that should be done. For example, I'm a former violinist. I used to play the violin many moons ago. Mm-hmm. And so I can go anywhere in the world and borrow a violin if I had a concert and be able to play, because the strings would be in the same order. There's no guessing game. Whereas with steel pans, even though, especially with the tenor pan and the double second, the layout of the notes are more standard now. It's still not totally codified. And for example, the tenor pan that I play, this is called the thirds and fourths tenor pan, right? I'm not going to get too technical, but this is an older model that I grew up playing in Trinidad. And both bands that I played with in San Fernando use this layout. However, it's for the most part very different to the fourths and fifths steel pan, which was designed by the aforementioned Anthony Williams. And that's the pan that most bands play on, right? So when I'm traveling, if my pan doesn't show up, you're in trouble. Yeah, I do play the fourths and fifths, but no near as well, the thirds and fourths. And so from an educational standpoint as well, you need to have that consistency, not just in terms of where the notes are laid out, but in terms of the range, so you want to know that, okay, you have an instrument, tenor pan section that starts from middle C, it goes up to high F sharp. You have that consistency. So when you write for the instrument, you know exactly what you're writing for. So it's something that needs to happen. However, I think it may be a bit too early in our history for it to be totally standardized. And why I say that, again, there are certain things that I'll play on my pan that may be easier to execute than on the fourths and fifths, and vice versa. So in some ways, I think we need to have a coming together, not only of players, but players and the tuners, because tuners will tell you there's certain notes that you place next to each other, and you know, there's just a certain sonority that's elicited that it's so beautiful. But from a playing standpoint, that may not necessarily be ideal, you know. So we need to have these consistent conversations. And also when we come to it, we sort of need to divorce our tendency to just, well, this is my thing and this is how it's going to be. We need to think about the big picture, what's best for everybody involved. And you can still have your individual pans, you know. I'm not going to stop playing my thirds and fourths pan, you know, but again, from an educational standpoint, we need to go in that direction.
We know that ain't gonna happen, because if they can't even have the whole of it, I'm a pessimist. I'm very cynical with regards to certain things. I can't help it. I mean, I can.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's hard. One more question. What do you think about the G-pan?
Well, could I elaborate on what you just said, though?
Go ahead.
You remind me of my mentor, and you know, he was my best friend, Dr. Clifford Alexis, right? He was from the old school, right? Almost from the embryonic stages of this instrument. And many times we'd have conversations and he'd get really upset because he felt like there was no progress being made. But what I would say to him is that there was a lot of progress being made, but so many times we took it for granted, or it didn't happen as quickly as we would want, you know. But again, we look at the players of today. Most of them can read and write music, you know, they're more business savvy, etc. That's something that didn't happen maybe 40, 50 years ago. So there is progress being made. Yes, we would like things to happen faster, you know. So that's how I feel about that. With respect to the G-pan, I don't have much experience with it. I've only played the G-pan maybe once or twice in Trinidad, and that was just for a few minutes. I know the idea is to have as many notes on one surface, you know, that could cover a wide range, which is great. But I have heard that it could be quite cumbersome, you know, to travel with. It takes some getting used to. So, you know,
I personally, I'm not for it. I tend to be, well, old school, if you want to put it that way. I really feel that the beauty of the steel pan needs to remain the way it is.
So are you speaking about the G-pan or the E-pan? The electronic steel pan?
The electronic steel pan.
Okay, so the G-pan is actually an acoustic instrument.
Okay.
So it's not.
See, thanks for enlightening me.
No problem, no problem. But so that you have the E-pan and you also have and the name is escaping me, but there are two electronic steel pans that that people have been working on. And here's the thing with that. I don't believe either of the inventors of those electronic instruments are trying to get rid of the acoustic steel pan. I've seen different interviews with them, and they've never articulated that. Now, if we think about the piano, you have the acoustic piano, but you also have an electronic version, you know, the synthesizer, etc. And some of the greatest pianists in the world, especially in jazz, people like Herbie Hancock, the late Chick Corea, they play both, you know. And so it just depends on the circumstance, the musical situation. There's certain things certain sounds you definitely will not get from an acoustic piano that you can get on the electronic. So if the end result is to replace the acoustic version, I'm definitely not for that. But they can work together, I think.
I don't know. I mean, in my mind, because I think a little bit different to a lot of people, it's for me, it felt like if they were trying to replace it. And that got me kind of upset some years ago. And I've never changed from that, you know, that thought process. So I'm like stuck in that zone, and I'm like stuck in that zone. But
I understand how you feel. And I mean, I've seen comments online from various people where they felt like that as well. But if I'm being honest again, I've never seen interviews with Dr. Brian Copeland, or why is his name escaping me right now? It'll come back to me. But the inventor of the EPAN, Salmon Cupid. You know, I've
Yes,
never
that's the one that I remember his name.
I've never heard them articulate that they're trying to replace the acoustic steel pan.
Mm.
And they both readily admitted that the charm of a pan is the acoustic sound. There's no replacing that. That's what people fall in love with, you know. But at the same time, we can't let, you know, the fact that we're tied to this particular sound or way of thinking deny us progress, you know. And I know what it's like. Change is inevitable, and it's not always comfortable initially, you know, but sometimes when we give it a chance, it can lead to amazing things, not to the detriment of what came before. And I think we both agree. We don't want to, you know, replace the acoustic steel pan.
Don't want to. As I did say that was the last question, but I have one more like a statement question kind of thing. In reading up about you, one term that resonated a couple of times was the word clinician. Now, I am a clinician. I'm a clinician that deals with a mental health clinician.
Okay.
But I never really saw it within the context of the steel pan. But when you talk, when I'm talking to you and reading up about you, yes, you are a clinician of the steel pan. And I'm sure that every day when you go into classroom, that's how you come across as a clinician. Thoughts?
I've never thought about myself as a clinician. You know, I enjoy educating, and part of it is because when I came to NIU, I knew very little about the history, not only of steel pan, but the history of Trinidad and Tobago. You know, yes, you learn certain things in class and you learn enough to pass an exam. That's it. But again, I was very young, and being around people like the late Clifford Alexis, who again was around almost from the embryonic stages of this instrument, and actually seeing the physical scars, physical and mental, and speaking to him about the mental part of what he had to deal with, where the pioneers of these instruments, as you know, were looked down upon by many in society. And to understand that because of people like him, and we were talking about the importance of mentors, I can live my dream. So it was incumbent upon me to learn as much about this instrument and our country as possible. And wherever I travel or just here at NIU, speaking to students from Trinidad and Tobago, many of whom are very young, it's incumbent upon me to educate them about that and to help them not take themselves for granted, their genius, their beauty for granted. Because a lot of times, I remember when I first started teaching, I'd have students work on sight reading, you know, where you put music in front of them and immediately they try to play it. The examples that I would use would be by European composers, Mozart and Beethoven, fantastic composers. But over the past few years, what I've tried to do is to also take examples from our culture, from the Caribbean, put it in front of them and help them to grow their sight reading, but also their understanding of music that comes specifically from their culture, which is very, very important. Especially in this day where we need to celebrate, you know, diversity and equity and belonging, you know. So clinician, I'll leave that to other people.
Yeah, you are a clinician. So I'm telling you, I ain't asking you. You are a clinician. Yes, you are. So add that to the list of things, the list of adjectives. You're a professor, an educator, same thing, a clinician, a panist, a performer, a husband, a dad. And probably there are a couple others that we haven't really, and it's such an honor to have you on the show. Before you leave, I want people to please purchase this book, because I will purchase it today. Steel Pan in Education by Andrew Martin, Ray Funk, and Janine Remy. And I will read it and probably share some information in the coming months, but it's such an honor to have you on the show.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you.
Please return, okay?
Anytime. Well, we'll make it happen. We'll make it happen. Thank you so much for having me.
Live. Now we go see about that, but
we'll make it happen.
Yes. You have a blessed rest of the day and have a Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays to you and the rest of the family.
Thank you very much. Same to you.
Thank you.
Dilemma, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here. I'm trying to end the meeting, but I want to call you after.
Before you end it, I just want to mention, well, if you can mention this the steel band program, where we're going to celebrate our 50th
It's still recording. It's still recording. Go ahead.
Okay. So the NIU Steel Band program will celebrate our 50th anniversary in the spring. Our event will be Sunday, April 16, 2023. So it's quite an achievement, and we usually stream our concerts live. So we hope that folks can view it.
So what we will do, thank you so much, Liam. Remember, there's a concert coming up. See the date again, I'm sorry?
It's Sunday, April 16th, 2023.
Sunday, April 16, 2023, and that would be the Northern Illinois University School of Music.
The Steel Band program's 50th.
And it will be 50th anniversary, and it will be streamed live.
It'll be streamed live, 3 p.m. That's Central Time.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.